Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers and certainly hope you're enjoying your weekend. For the first time in about 15 months, it is a weekend without tight restrictions from Frankfort to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. We all hope it signals that we can put it in the rearview mirror and start to focus on rebuilding the economy. Along the way, the governor was sued numerous times. He took the state legislature to court himself. Governor Andy Beshear was hanged in effigy during a demonstration at the governor's mansion. It has been a divisive time socially and politically. Just before this taping, the governor signed an executive order lifting restrictions in most places, and he thanked his team. And now Governor Beshear joins us on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome, and we appreciate you talking with us.
Thank you for having me, Bill, and I hope everybody is enjoying this weekend.
Governor, the restrictions lifted after 462 days. We counted that. When you look back at the shutdowns, the mask mandates, the rules that you crafted from Frankfort, how much did you look forward to this day eventually coming?
Oh my. I've looked forward to this day since at least March the 6th, when we had our very first case and entered the first emergency order. My goodness, in going back, I didn't know what I'd feel today, but I feel both relief and gratitude. Relief because we are now at a place where over 2.1 million people are vaccinated, where we have some of our lowest cases and positivity rates, where our people can be safe, and that's relief. Gratitude towards what got us here. Gratitude for science, gratitude for God, for such effective vaccines, and gratitude for the people of Kentucky, because it's their goodness, their willingness to live for each other that has us here today. So I've looked forward to this day every day since March the 6th.
Let's look back to the spring of last year. People were scared, no question. How difficult was it for you to keep up with the changing data and the science, the information that was coming in? And were there times where you just didn't know what to do at the moment?
Well, it was a challenge because it was a virus that none of us had ever faced, and they don't write a playbook for this. Now, initial estimates in Kentucky were that we might lose 80,000 people. And I got to tell you, I gulped a little bit after seeing that, being the captain of the ship, if that was going to happen. But what it did is it clarified that this thing isn't a red state or a blue state, a Democrat or a Republican thing. It was a life and death thing. And that required putting politics behind and Bill doing things that you and I both know they tell you never to do in these jobs. I said I don't know in response to questions more times during this last 15 months than I ever would have thought. I had to make myself vulnerable to relate to people because my family was going through some of these difficulties too, of remote learning and other issues. I lost people that I loved and cared about during this pandemic. So yes, it was a challenge early on, but we also had wonderful, caring people as a part of this team, and we had a whole Commonwealth that just wanted to do the right thing, that wanted that information so much, and then wanted to model their behavior so they could protect one another. Now, I think things would have been different if we were in a different state because our people wanted to do the right thing. And just having that information when we learn more, I mean, a virus that had never existed, initially not having any testing and then having limited testing. I'll tell you what, the hardest thing I've ever done is read the deaths, but the second hardest thing was to tell people who were scared, who thought they had the virus, not to get tested if they were young enough and likely strong enough to get through it. And that was such a difficult time to tell our nurses and doctors we still needed them to go on a COVID wing, even though we didn't have enough N95 masks for them. It was a very tough and a very scary time, but guess what? Our hospitals were never overrun like so many others. Our grocery stores never ran out of food like we saw in a couple other places for a short period of time, and our people did not panic.
Governor, all of that said, and all of our best efforts, we still lost more than 7,000 Kentuckians, even with the tough restrictions. Do you think it would have been worse without the mandates?
Unquestionably. I mean, we have lost 7,100 children of God, irreplaceable. That's a loss for their family, for their communities, and it is heartbreaking. All you have to do is look at the flags right behind my office to see how many people that is. But you look at every other state, you look at the Dakotas that wouldn't do the right thing until they were in absolute crisis. Look at the places where hospitals were overrun, where they had to pull up freezer trucks outside of morgues. That never happened here. And then you look at the fact that Kentucky, coming into this virus, was number 1, 2, or 3 in diabetes, heart disease, and lung cancer. Those are all the organs that COVID comes for. Yet we have come out better than most. So I believe the decisions we made were the right ones. And I think people out there know that even if they disagreed with me, I thought I was doing the right thing with each one we made.
You said Friday that you gave 250 COVID briefings in the interest of keeping people informed. Do you think it was that high visibility on your part that led to some resentment from lawmakers who thought they should have played a larger role in the response to COVID?
You know, I don't worry about that much, Bill. You know, we see some of the same lawmakers who are upset that we have good economic development announcements. And in an issue of a pandemic, or now in what I hope is a time of prosperity, you really see who puts the people first versus the politics first. If somebody is doing a good thing that helps people, are you happy because it helps people, or are you upset because it may boost them in some strange way politically? I've moved past all of that. We're doing the right things. We were doing the right thing then by speaking directly to the people of Kentucky, and we're trying to do the right thing now with an economy that is taking off and trying to make sure that prosperity reaches every part of the Commonwealth. You can't get some to stop playing politics, and at some point you stop worrying about it, you focus on our families, and you try to move us forward.
Well, the state legislature obviously tried to limit your mandates. They passed a state law to do that, and then you sued, and that is on hold now before the state Supreme Court. Did you consider at any point letting them take charge of the public health policy, and then if there was a problem with the response, it would have been on them?
Oh, listen, this is the most important thing that I'll ever be called to do. And the idea that I would hand it to someone else that has tried to eliminate a mask mandate, has questioned the deadliness of the virus, that's something that would have cost Kentuckians their lives. Listen, a governor is one person, meaning if they're willing, they can have the courage to make the tough decisions. The legislature and the numbers that are there, it's just not set up to be able to take something that's tough and that could eliminate any political future or re-election that you have, and yet you still do the right thing. Now, I just early on knew that if I was going to be able to put my head on my pillow every night, if I was going to be able to look at my kids and everybody else's, that I was going to have the courage to do the right thing no matter what happened afterwards. Now, have those decisions, the right decisions, upset some? Sure. But you look back at every leader who's had to make tough decisions. You look back at the Bible, where my faith teaches me that doing the right thing is supposed to be hard, but it's still the right thing, and you still do it.
But the Supreme Court of Kentucky is deciding a case that you brought against the state legislature, which would substantially alter the emergency power for you and for future governors. Did you at any point consider calling the state legislature in after a set amount of time and working on this together, as they have said they were left out of the process?
Well, we've tried to work with the legislature on numerous things, and you know, this has been certainly a difficult time where you've seen different emotions out of folks. But the approach that the legislature took that I had to sue over was one that said, we'll just put the CDC guidance into state law, and the CDC came out and said, wait, it's not written that way. It's a terrible idea. Don't do it. And our state legislature went ahead and did it anyways. Now, Bill, certainly they didn't think that that's a legitimate approach if the group that they were trying to base it on said don't do it. It was more about power and politics, and I'm just not willing to play those games.
You had said that there would come a time when we could look back and ask what went right and what went wrong in Kentucky's response to COVID-19. Is this the appropriate time to do that? Are we there yet?
It's probably too early. A lot of what we look at right now is information we wish we would have had earlier. Our challenge was making battlefield decisions each day based on limited information on a new virus. If I looked back now, I wish I would have known the effectiveness of masks early on, but we were getting different information from the national experts. And I wish we would have had a better idea about how long it would take. Because to be able to early on say to Kentuckians, we are at war. That's what each of these pandemics are. And wars aren't won in weeks. They're typically won in years. Then you know, maybe some of what we saw would be more expected by individuals. But those are all things that, again, in hindsight, we didn't have the knowledge of. If I go back further in time, I would have pushed even harder during my first session before this hit for our unemployment system to be made whole after years and years of cuts in the previous administration. Certainly, if we look at what went right, a lot. We have incredibly effective vaccines in the shortest period of time in our history. Again, we'll give scientists the credit for getting them out fast, but I'll give God the credit for them being so effective on the very first try. I mean, it is a miracle. And then I believe that once we learned exactly how the virus spread, being able to take a more surgical approach was the right thing to do as we went forward.
You had said early on that you wanted 2.5 million Kentuckians to have been vaccinated by the time you lifted restrictions. We're at 2.1 million, and you've done that today. What changed your thinking on that?
Well, more information on the effectiveness of the vaccines. Originally, we had hoped that they would protect an individual from getting the virus, but we didn't know that it could keep them from spreading the virus, or if it would just keep them from getting sick. What we learned is that they are more effective in the field than they were in the studies, and that they not only keep you from getting sick, in many instances, they keep you from getting it at all, and they certainly reduce your ability to spread. And so with all of that, with the effectiveness, with our cases on a downward trajectory, with our positivity rate going that same way, and having sufficient healthcare capacity, we could do it before we hit 2.5 million. I still want to hit 2.5 million. But look at who has been vaccinated among the 2.1 million. It's 84% of all Kentuckians 65 and older, those most at risk. We're over 60% now with that next age group, 50 to 60. And now we can have even 12 to 16-year-olds get vaccinated, which is going to take some time, but again, just provides more opportunity for people to do the right thing.
And our Kentucky Newsmakers interview continues now with the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear. Governor, many business people and certainly a lot of Republicans are now saying the enhanced unemployment benefits are keeping people from returning to the workforces. They note the help wanted signs all over the state. Do you plan to phase those benefits out before the federal money runs out in September?
Well, the way we're analyzing this is to make sure we're not looking at it in political terms, Democrat versus Republican, red state versus blue state. We are applying sound economic principles because we want our resurgence to continue, and we don't want to send a shock through our economy. So these benefits right now put about $34 million a week into Kentucky's economy. The number one place they're spent are grocery stores, but they're also spent at restaurants and retail, two areas that have been hit so hard in this pandemic. So if we're not smart about our approach, if we don't thread the needle over the coming months, we're going to see the same businesses that may have been hurt the most take another hit, and that's not right. We also have to recognize that enhanced unemployment benefits may be one causal factor of jobs not being filled, but there are at least two others. Child care. So much of it, unfortunately, went away during the pandemic, and school hasn't started back up yet. As we rebuild child care, we have to understand it's going to take some longer to get in the workforce. And the other piece is there are some who are still hesitant about this virus. Remember, vaccines really only became available to all of the general public February or March, and we're just here in June. So our goal is to look at some different incentives to get people off of the pandemic unemployment and back at work, while at the same time continuing to inject some of these dollars into the economy, because right now our economy's taken off. And I want to make sure it continues this really incredible resurgence that Moody's called with gusto. To do that, we can't have everybody on these all the way through the end of September, which at least for the federal government is when it'll expire. But at the same time, we can't kick people off tomorrow that don't have child care yet.
What do you think, Evan? Are you interested in the proposed incentives for those who do go back to work, like a bonus if they take a job and keep it for a time? That's something that's being tried in Arizona right now.
Yes, we're looking at it right now. We're looking at multiple different states. I think Montana's done it too. Again, not being the fastest, but trying to be the smartest to learn what others have done. And I'm having daily conversation with business leaders out there. I was talking to one the other day that's having trouble placing drivers, which they need, and they think that this is a part of it. But they also run a grocery chain that these dollars are helping to lift back up their business. So they recognize that it's complicated. Certainly, we're looking at what's the best way through incentives that we can work this the right way to get people back into the workforce while not causing a shock in a resurging economy.
And Governor, the problems with unemployment in the system in Kentucky are well known and documented and reported, from fraud to enormous delays. As you look back at what happened and try to look forward now, is that going to take a major expenditure on the state's part to try to right that system, or was the faucet just too wide open during that time, as some have said?
Well, I wouldn't say it's going to take a major expenditure, but it's going to take a sufficient expenditure. Obviously, what the legislature had been spending before was not sufficient. You know, they'd cut $18 million from the budget. They'd moved 90 people from UI that could have been doing claims out. We hadn't replaced an IT system that was put into place before I was born. It is pre-DOS. And yes, we have an unprecedented number, the most ever, of claims. But at the same time, we had a system that we didn't invest in during good times, and then we expect to perform during the very worst of times. I mean, any manager would tell you that can't work. But here's the unfortunate thing. A lot of legislators, rightfully, and others, said our people need help, and they did, and that we weren't moving fast enough. And while we were trying, they're right. But in this last General Assembly, when we asked for more permanent long-term funding to fix it, we were told no. Again, that same mistake being made of not having sufficient investment in that system. But we're going to continue to push, because what happened during this time should never happen again in terms of the unemployment system.
Let me ask you this quickly, Governor. There is a lot of federal money coming in from Washington. The Republicans there voted against it, but Republicans control the legislature here, and they want to say in determining how it is spent. The local governments are making their decisions right now. Do you have plans to call the legislature into special session, or how will you align the money with your own priorities?
So one of the acts of bipartisanship, and we haven't seen enough of them, but we've still seen it at the end of the last session, was when myself, my team, legislative leadership, sat around a big conference table in the Supreme Court chambers where we could spread out, and came to an agreement about how to appropriate and spend the first round of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. Now, we get it in portions. We've gotten the first $1.1 billion. We can't get the next $1.1 until a year from now. And the legislature has already appropriated nearly all of that first $1.1 billion. So I think we're going to be able to address it in this next legislative session. We certainly won't have additional dollars until then. But this cooperative spirit of bipartisanship has worked well. It's going to create 14,500 plus new jobs. It's going to bring clean drinking water and internet access to people who haven't had it. It's going to do all those things without raising people's bills. It's a really special moment of just doing the right thing. And working through this, the legislative leaders have been really collaborative. Everybody didn't get all of what they want, but we came to some really good decisions, and I think we're going to be able to continue to do that.
Governor Andy Beshear, thank you for being with us on Kentucky Newsmakers. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And stay with us. We'll be back on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. Kentucky's COVID-19 restrictions were lifted Friday. Things are starting to look more normal. But many who lost their jobs during the pandemic face a longer battle for financial recovery. For the last year, we've brought you the stories of people struggling to get their unemployment benefits. And more than a year after the pandemic began, some are still waiting for payments. As WKYT investigative reporter Garrett Weimer shows us, some are short on cash and short on patience and still have a long way to go.
Even with reminders all around her,
we've prayed more, but I don't know about worrying less.
It's still been tough.
It's a hard thing to do.
For Beverly Miller to keep her spirits up.
Yeah.
She's thankful to have a roof over her head, living with her mother, but knowing her money won't stretch forever. Miller says she's owed months of back pay from July 2020, but she's not sure when she'll ever get it.
I can't go to the grocery store until then. When unemployment gets to me, I'll come back and pay you. I can't tell the electric company. When they get to me, I'll pay the electric bill. There's things that I have to do, even though right now we're surviving.
Please try you call again later or visit.
And she's not been able to get through to get help. The latest data from the Kentucky Labor Cabinet shows thousands are also waiting.
The system is clearly broken.
Britt Belbeck is back to work now, but is also missing months of back pay. Benefit timeliness reports from the U.S. Department of Labor show that the state's first payment promptness within 21 days dropped from 96% at the end of March 2020 down to a low of 27% in October. That's even with an outside company hired to help speed up the process. In the latest data released June 2nd, the Kentucky Labor Cabinet says more than 2.3 million total claims were filed from March 2020 through April 2021. That number includes duplicates. And so when we break down the other categories, we don't have each claim accounted for, but we do know the state has denied 127,000 claims. It has paid out 700,000 claims. Roughly 122,000 claims are still pending, and half of those don't even have fraud or identity issues stopping them. Thousands of those unresolved claims were filed last spring or summer. In a statement, a Labor Cabinet spokesperson told me, quote, "The agency continues to work each and every day to ensure eligible claimants receive the benefits to which they are entitled, and we will not stop until that goal is accomplished." But folks I talk to are frustrated.
I'm a small person that didn't get paid for 5 months. There are people that haven't been paid for over a year. And that's why I just want to be a voice to say, you're not alone, and we're going to keep fighting for this.
Those living on borrowed money and borrowed time say things have to be fixed soon.
I have bill collectors saying, hey, you owe me. Hey, you owe me. Hey, you owe me. Yes, I know I owe you, but I don't have the money to pay you. When I get it, I will pay you, but that doesn't ease their mind. It doesn't ease my mind.
For English, please press 1.
It's why every day Beverly Miller sits at the kitchen table, alternating from calling and emailing the unemployment office.
Thank you for calling the Unemployment Insurance Helpline.
To applying for new work online. Miller is grateful jobs are opening up, but she says she's had a hard time having much luck in her search.
Even though they say they don't age or sex discriminate, and they probably don't. But are you going to hire the 18-year-old that can pick up 80 pounds or the 45-year-old woman, you know? So
for now, she'll keep up her daily routine here. Meanwhile, watching the world get back to normal.
I go to bed every night knowing, what am I going to do? What am I going to, you know?
Wondering when her life will. Garrett Weimer, WKYT.
Frustrations go on. Well, one of the largest industrial bills in U.S. history has cleared the Senate. Will Congress do what it takes to get the bill to the president's desk? Our chief national political analyst, Greta Van Susteren, has more.
Hello, I'm Greta Van Susteren, and here is your full court fast break. A landmark bipartisan deal. Senate Democrats and Republicans coming together, hoping to checkmate our greatest economic rival, China. This week, the Senate passing the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. The vote was 68 to 32. Now the bill travels across Capitol Hill to the House for consideration. If the House passes the bill as is, this package would invest more than $200 billion into science, research, and manufacturing. It would put a special focus on critical fields like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and 5G technology. Plus, it would create new regional tech hubs, offering job and research opportunities all across the country. And perhaps most importantly, the bill would put more than $50 billion towards semiconductor research, design, and production. The goal? To close holes in the U.S. supply chains recently exposed by the global chip shortage. This week, the White House also tackling that shortage. It announced a new task force to address bottlenecks in U.S. supply chains in the semiconductor construction and agricultural sectors. We recently spoke to Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow. She says President Biden understands that every step along the supply chain is critical.
His administration understands that it's not just enough to buy the finished product in America. Every one of those component parts is about jobs, whether it's solar panels, which almost all of them come from China now, even though we have 1/3 of the raw materials at Hemlock Semiconductor in Midland, Michigan, the polysilicon, the finished products are coming from China. There is no reason for that.
Want more Full Court Press? Tune in Sundays. We bring politics home, covering the national stories that impact you.
And Full Court Press with Greta Van Susteren is coming up this morning at 11:30 on WKYT. Thank you so much for being along for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. We certainly hope you make it a good week ahead.